When we look at the existing health crisis and COVID-19, and people ask you what is it that's going to change in the world in relation to that, I think we have to be a little bit circumspect about saying that the whole world is going to transform because of it. I think we need to give that a little bit of time. Certainly in terms of people's health and well-being in buildings, we need to consider them quite carefully. But our understanding of the infection is still at the sort of fairly basic stage at the moment, and I think people shouldn't jump to conclusions.
If you have a sense of history, I think you see COVID in the context of human evolution and the last 1,000 years. It's a version of evolutionary normality. It's not a special imposition on this generation, and therefore you have to get both your psyche and your civilization around it and over it, and to manage it in that way. In the context of it, it's causing a huge amount of claustrophobia. And I think architects should be available, ready, vocal about being able to answer people's questions when they come out of it. People will be really focused on the difficulty of where they live and its lack of facilities in a way that they never have been before.
Short-term solutions for problems can also lead to problems in themselves. If we make residential spaces too small and too limited, then when time comes when you have to spend 3 months in a particular place, you need a window to open out to a balcony. You need to be able to see nature. That nature is an integral part of the architectural situation.
You know, when you're in the situation of COVID and you're in your own house, you appreciate what you have. If you have a garden, if you have enough space, it does make you realise that it is so important to provide everyone else with those things.
I think it's a time of enormous potential to re-evaluate the basic values that have been imposed or that we have been exercising, let's say. It brings us forward rather than back to seriously thinking about the fact that we are biological beings. We need sunshine, we need to see the sky, we need a window, we need fresh air, we need to be able to be private, and we need to be able to retreat. We need each other. We're biological beings.
One of the saddest things is to see the cities empty now, because we had relied so much on the office worker to inhabit the city centre.
The primary lesson from the COVID pandemic is that there aren't anything like enough people living in the centre of Dublin to sustain the local businesses. The tourist economy collapsed. Many of the businesses indeed were dependent on the tourist economy. That went out the door. Office workers started working from home, thus depriving, cafes and sandwich shops and all the rest of it of their business. The place was thronged with tourists every day and every night. And that's something that is a bit surreal about it now. It's so quiet. My God, it's so quiet.
The pressure we're finding ourselves under with COVID and almost what seems to be a retreat from the city, it's doubly, trebly, quadruply important that we proclaim our own belief in the credibility of the city and the necessity for the city to thrive.
We're trying to plan for 2050 and beyond, and what will Dublin look like? And, as a local authority, how do we try and put buildings and spaces here that will help people grow over the next 20, 30, 40 years?
The city's been challenged and questioned. Will people be working? Will we be shopping? Who'll be living? But in a sense, it makes then the need for civic and public investment and confidence. It's why people come to cities, is to gather.
Cities have developed through a time when there has been the presence of infectious disease all the time, and many cities have bound around in their form and their history issues which relate to infectious disease. People tended to leave the city when there was contagion, but one thing for sure is they always came back afterwards. So this idea that we're all going to empty ourselves out into the countryside and live semi-virtual lives in a state of nature assisted by technology is not something that I would necessarily agree with.
It somehow heightens the basic needs of human beings, which has always been at the basis of architecture. That's not new. It's not new. Alberti in the 15th century, the great humanist, talked about exactly the same things. So it's at the core of architecture. So in a sense, you could say that it's a time to highlight the essential qualities of architecture.
I do think that COVID has made us more aware that we are creatures of nature and that nature enriches our lives. It's not just something that you kind of obliterate, and it's a pity we have to knock down all these forests because we've got to build housing. You can integrate nature into design.
I think COVID will give us an opportunity to think in a new way about spaces and nature and where people travel and how they interrelate with each other. And architects should be there with answers and ideas now as to how that's going to be. And in some ways, even to excite and support people by those ideas now, thinking about something good could come out of this in the future.
I believe there's something quite central to human nature which has got to do with physical contact. It's got to do with smell, eye contact, touch, the sixth sense you have when you're in a room with somebody, by being with them, by gestures and expressions and body language across the table, the way in which families come together, and the kind of ache that most people have had for touch and connection over these last few months. To me, that's something that shouldn't be forgotten about. I think it's going to be absolutely central to, we are human animals, and the idea of us being independent minds communicating through virtual technology, I don't think is a believable idea. I think fundamentally we'll want to revert back to issues of closeness, to material contact, to touch, and to being together in communities, and as soon as we can, we'll do that. It's really the job for architects and for other people to find ways to do it safely.